She coldly said, "Cheating is normal, you're just too naive to accept it." I replied, "Maybe I'm just different." When her sister received the same evidence I had, being normal didn't save her from losing her family. Sometimes the most casual conversations reveal the deepest betrayals, and that Tuesday evening over leftover Chinese takeout, my entire world shifted in ways I never saw coming. I'm Marcus, 28, and I make my living as a freelance graphic designer here in Denver. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and lets me work with clients I actually respect. For 2 years, I'd been sharing an apartment with Sophia, who worked as a marketing coordinator at one of those mid-sized firms that handle everything from restaurant chains to tech startups. She was brilliant at her job, always staying late to perfect campaigns, always networking at industry events, always pushing herself to climb higher in a competitive field. I admired her drive, even when it meant eating dinner alone most nights and falling asleep to the sound of her key turning in the lock well past midnight. That particular evening started like any other. Sophia had finally made it home before 9 p.m. for once, and we were catching up over General Tso's chicken while some Netflix crime documentary played in the background. The show was covering a scandal where a politician's wife had discovered his affairs through leaked text messages, and I made some offhand comment about how devastating that must have been for her family. Sophia set down her chopsticks and looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before, not angry, not defensive, just coldly educational, like she was about to explain basic math to a child. "You know, Marcus, that kind of thinking is exactly why you'll never understand how the real world works," she said, her voice carrying this patronizing tone that made my stomach clench. "Cheating isn't some horrible betrayal, it's just human nature. Everyone does it eventually, you're just too naive to see it." I stared at her, wondering if this was some kind of philosophical debate or if she was testing my reaction to something. "Not everyone cheats, Sophia. Plenty of people stay faithful their entire lives." She actually laughed, not a bitter laugh, but the kind of amused chuckle you'd give someone who insisted the earth was flat. "That's what they tell you, but behind closed doors? Please." I've been seeing Kevin for almost a year now, and honestly, it's made me realize how immature your whole monogamy is sacred worldview really is. The words hit me like ice water, but what was worse was her delivery, casual, matter-of-fact, like she just mentioned picking up coffee on her way to work. Kevin was her supervisor, a 45-year-old department head whose wife Linda had suffered a stroke 8 months ago. I'd met him at a few company events, watched him tell stories about helping his wife through physical therapy, seen the sympathy in people's eyes when they asked about her recovery. "You've been sleeping with Kevin," I said slowly, needing to hear myself say it to make it real. "For a year." "God, you make it sound so sordid," she replied, rolling her eyes. "We have a connection, Marcus. An intellectual partnership. He understands my career ambitions, my need for growth. We meet at hotels usually. The Marriott downtown has become our regular spot. His wife is, well, she's focused on her recovery, and Kevin needs someone who can match his energy level." I felt something cold and hollow spreading through my chest as the pieces clicked into place. All those late nights at the office, all those weekend networking events, all those times she'd come home smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "You've been lying to me for a year," I said, and even to my own ears my voice sounded distant. "I haven't been lying about anything important," she snapped back. "I still care about you, Marcus. You're stable, you're reliable, you're safe. But Kevin offers something you can't, real professional partnership, intellectual stimulation, the kind of ambition that drives actual success." She reached across the table like she was going to take my hand, and I pulled back instinctively. "Most people our age have multiple relationships, Marcus. The whole one person forever thing is outdated religious nonsense that doesn't work in the modern world. You need to grow up and accept that mature adults understand the difference between emotional security and physical attraction." I sat there processing what she just told me, trying to wrap my mind around the casual cruelty of it all. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake she was confessing. This was a philosophical lecture about why I was wrong to expect basic loyalty. "So what exactly are you saying, Sophia?" "I'm saying that if you can't handle adult relationships, Maybe you should stick to dating college girls who still believe in fairy tales, she said, standing up and gathering her purse. I'm going to stay at Ashley's place tonight. When you're ready to have a mature conversation about how real relationships work, let me know. She walked out without another word, leaving me sitting there with cold Chinese food and the sudden understanding that the woman I'd planned a future with had been treating me like a convenient placeholder while she built a life with someone else. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal, it was the condescending certainty in her voice when she explained why I was wrong to expect better. 3 days after Sophia's casual bombshell, I was sitting in our apartment trying to figure out how to untangle 2 years of shared everything when I noticed her tablet still connected to our home Wi-Fi. She'd been in such a hurry to escape to Ashley's place that she'd left it charging on the kitchen counter, and apparently forgotten that we'd synced our cloud storage accounts months ago when she needed extra space for work files. I wasn't planning to snoop, honestly, I was just trying to remove my photos from the shared albums, but when I opened the tablet, her message app was still logged in and actively syncing. The first conversation thread I saw was labeled Kevin Redheart and dated back 13 months, which meant she'd been lying about the timeline too. I should have closed it right then, should have respected whatever privacy she had left, but something compelled me to scroll through what turned out to be the most devastating evidence of calculated betrayal I could have imagined. The early messages were standard affair material, stolen moments, secret meetings, promises about leaving their respective partners when the time was right. But as I scrolled deeper, the conversations revealed something far worse than simple infidelity. Kevin wasn't just cheating on his stroke survivor wife. He was actively planning to financially destroy her while Sophia helped orchestrate the entire scheme. "Baby, my brother set up those cryptocurrency wallets like we discussed," read one message from Kevin dated 6 weeks ago. "Once I transfer the remaining assets, Linda won't be able to trace anything. The medical expenses story will explain why we're suddenly broke, and she'll be lucky to get the house." Sophia's response made my blood run cold. "Perfect. I've been working on those presentation designs you'll need for the Morrison account pitch. Once you get that promotion, we can finally stop pretending this is just physical. Can't wait to see Linda's face when she realizes what real partnership looks like." The messages showed months of Sophia staying late not for her own career, but to complete Kevin's work while he took full credit. She designed entire marketing campaigns, written strategic proposals, even handled client communications, all so Kevin could appear more competent to the board while planning his escape from his marriage. But the most sickening part was how they talked about Linda, a woman recovering from a stroke who had no idea her husband was stealing their future. "Linda asked me about our vacation fund today," Kevin had written last month. "I told her the medical bills wiped us out. She actually apologized for being such a financial burden. God, sometimes I almost feel guilty." "Don't," Sophia replied. "She's not your responsibility anymore. You deserve someone who can actually contribute to your life instead of draining it. Besides, she's getting the best care money can buy. Your money, technically, but still. You're right. Can't wait until Tommy graduates and I can finally file. 2 more years of playing the devoted husband, then we're free." The casual cruelty was breathtaking. These weren't just 2 people having an affair. They were systematically planning to leave a stroke survivor with nothing while mocking her medical condition. I found messages where they laughed about Linda's speech therapy sessions, joked about her physical limitations, and calculated how much they could steal before anyone noticed. Kevin had been moving money for months, converting joint assets into cryptocurrency wallets that Linda would never discover, while Sophia helped him create fake invoices and expense reports to justify the missing funds. The professional misconduct was equally damning. Sophia wasn't just sleeping with her supervisor, she was doing his job while he committed fraud. The metadata on dozens of files showed her as the creator, but Kevin's name was on every presentation, every proposal, every strategic document that had earned him recognition from the board. She'd become his ghost employee, sacrificing her own career advancement to make him look successful while he promised her a future built on stolen money and destroyed lives. One conversation from last week particularly stood out. "Marcus is getting suspicious about my schedule," Sophia had written. "He asked why I've been working so many weekends when my official timesheets show normal hours." "Just tell him you're networking," Kevin replied. He's too naive to understand how business really works anyway. Linda's the same way. Thinks success comes from being nice and working hard. Neither of them gets that you have to take what you want in this world. Exactly. Sometimes I feel like I'm dating a child. Marcus still believes in things like loyalty and honesty, like we're living in some romantic comedy instead of the real world. Reading that exchange felt like being punched in the stomach. I'd spent 2 years with someone who viewed basic human decency as naivety, who saw my trust as weakness rather than love. But what made it worse was knowing that Linda was going through the same thing, except her husband was actively stealing from her while she focused on recovering her health and mobility. The evidence painted a picture of two predators who'd found each other and decided that everyone else in their lives was fair game for manipulation and theft. They'd created a bubble where cruelty was sophisticated, where betrayal was mature, and where destroying innocent people was just the cost of getting what they wanted. Sitting there with a tablet full of evidence that could destroy lives, I faced a choice that would define what kind of person I really was. My first instinct was to confront Kevin directly, maybe call Linda and dump everything on her while she was still recovering from a stroke. But something about that approach felt wrong, too chaotic, too likely to cause maximum damage without ensuring the right people could handle the aftermath responsibly. That's when I remembered something Sophia had mentioned months ago about Linda's sister Emma working at the same marketing firm, though in a different department handling client services while Sophia worked in creative development. Emma had always struck me as sharp during the few company events I'd attended, the kind of person who noticed details others missed and asked the right questions when something didn't add up. More importantly, she'd been protective of Linda since the stroke, and I'd overheard her expressing concern about Kevin's behavior during Linda's recovery period. If anyone could handle this evidence responsibly while ensuring Linda had proper support, it would be Emma. I spent the next day researching Emma's background through professional networks, wanting to make sure I understood who I was dealing with before involving her in something this explosive. What I discovered made me even more confident in my choice. Emma had 15 years of experience in marketing operations, specializing in compliance and fraud detection for client accounts. She'd built a reputation for identifying discrepancies in financial reporting and had actually helped expose 2 previous cases of employee misconduct at the firm. Her LinkedIn showed presentations on ethical business practices and corporate accountability, suggesting someone who took professional integrity seriously. But more importantly, her social media showed a woman who'd been actively supporting Linda through her recovery, posting encouragement about physical therapy milestones and organizing meal trains for the family during difficult periods. Creating an anonymous email account took me back to college journalism courses where we'd learned about protecting sources while ensuring credible information reached the right people. I uploaded every screenshot, every message thread, every piece of metadata that proved Sophia's authorship of Kevin's work, and every financial document showing the cryptocurrency transfers and hidden assets. The evidence was overwhelming, months of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal laid out in chronological order with timestamps and verification data that any competent investigator could follow. My message to Emma was straightforward. I work in the Denver area and have discovered evidence of serious professional misconduct and financial fraud involving Kevin Morrison and Sophia Chin. This includes embezzlement of company funds, falsification of work authorship, and plans to hide marital assets from Linda Morrison during her medical recovery. I'm sending this to you because I believe you have both the professional expertise to understand these implications and the personal connection to ensure Linda is protected. The attached evidence speaks for itself. I sent the email on a Thursday evening, knowing Emma would likely see it Friday morning when she was sharp and could dedicate proper attention to reviewing everything. What I didn't expect was how quickly she'd recognize the patterns and understand exactly what she was looking at. Emma called the anonymous number I'd provided within 2 hours of receiving the email, her voice tight with controlled fury and professional determination. "I don't know who you are, but this evidence explains so much about what I've been observing," she said without preamble. "Kevin's been taking credit for work that didn't match his usual style, and I've noticed irregularities in expense reports that cross my desk for approval. Plus, Sophia's been receiving packages and flowers at work that seemed expensive for someone at her salary level." She'd already started connecting dots I hadn't even considered, approaching the situation with the methodical precision of someone who understood both the personal stakes and the legal implications. I've been suspicious about Kevin's behavior since Linda's stroke, Emma continued. He's been pushing her to sign financial documents she's not ready to review, claiming they're just updating insurance policies and medical directives. Now I understand why he's been in such a hurry. The conversation revealed that Emma had been documenting her own concerns about Kevin's conduct, keeping notes about his requests for Linda to sign papers and his insistence that she shouldn't burden herself with financial details during her recovery. She'd also noticed that Kevin had been scheduling emergency meetings that coincided with Sophia's supposed late work nights, though she hadn't connected the two patterns until seeing the evidence. This goes beyond infidelity, Emma said, her voice taking on the professional tone of someone shifting into crisis management mode. Kevin's been using company resources to conduct personal affairs, falsifying work authorship for years, and planning to commit financial fraud against a stroke survivor. The board needs to see this immediately, but I need to coordinate with Linda's legal representation first. Emma's approach was exactly what I'd hoped for: strategic, protective, and focused on ensuring maximum consequences for Kevin while minimizing trauma for Linda. She understood that this wasn't just about exposing an affair, it was about preventing the systematic destruction of an innocent woman's financial future by people who viewed her medical condition as an opportunity for theft. By the end of our conversation, Emma had outlined a plan that would ensure Kevin faced both professional and legal consequences while Linda received proper support and legal protection. She'd already identified the best time to present the evidence for maximum impact, and she had the institutional knowledge to ensure the company's investigation would be thorough and impartial. "Whoever you are," Emma said before hanging up, "thank you for bringing this to someone who could handle it properly instead of just creating chaos. Linda deserves better than what these people planned for her." Emma's timing was absolutely perfect, and her execution was surgical in its precision. She waited exactly 1 week to review all the evidence, coordinate with Linda's attorney, and position herself strategically within the company's power structure before making her move. The quarterly board meeting was already scheduled for the following Tuesday, and Kevin was set to present what he claimed was his latest breakthrough campaign for the Morrison account, a presentation that the metadata clearly showed Sophia had created entirely on her own time using her personal software licenses. Emma had done her homework thoroughly, cross-referencing every document in the evidence package with company records, financial statements, and personnel files. What she discovered went far beyond Kevin and Sophia's current scheme. Kevin had been systematically stealing credit from junior employees for over 3 years, building his reputation and climbing the corporate ladder on other people's work while manipulating expense accounts to fund his lifestyle. The morning of the board meeting, Emma arrived early and quietly distributed copies of the evidence to each board member, along with a professionally prepared summary that outlined both the personal misconduct and the financial crimes. She'd organized everything chronologically, with clear documentation showing how Kevin had escalated from simple credit theft to outright embezzlement, using Sophia as both an accomplice and an unwitting cover for his activities. When Kevin stood up to deliver his presentation about innovative marketing strategies and client relationship management, he had no idea that every person in the room was watching him claim credit for work they knew he hadn't done. The PowerPoint slides bore Sophia's digital signature in the metadata, the design elements matched her established portfolio, and the strategic language was completely inconsistent with Kevin's previous work samples. Emma let him get halfway through the presentation before she spoke up. "Kevin, could you explain the technical process behind the conversion rate optimization strategy you're describing?" Her voice was professionally neutral, but there was steel underneath. "I'm particularly interested in how you developed the algorithmic approach to customer segmentation." Kevin stumbled through a vague response about market research and data analysis, clearly having no understanding of the technical details behind the work he was presenting. Emma followed up with increasingly specific questions about methodology, software applications, and strategic frameworks that exposed his complete lack of knowledge about his own supposed creation. The board members began exchanging glances as it became obvious that Kevin couldn't explain the work he was taking credit for. "That's interesting," Emma said calmly. because the metadata on these files shows they were created by Sophia Chen using her personal Adobe Creative Suite license on her home computer during hours when you were documented as being in other meetings. Would you like to explain how you created this work while you were simultaneously in budget meetings with the CFO? The room went completely silent. Kevin's face cycled through confusion, panic, and desperate calculation as he tried to figure out how Emma had obtained information that should have been impossible for her to access. But Emma wasn't finished. She'd prepared for this moment with the thoroughness of someone who understood that half measures would allow Kevin to escape consequences. Additionally, she continued, producing printed copies of the financial records, company IT has discovered irregular expense patterns in your department, including payments to hotels and restaurants that don't correspond to any documented business activities. The Morrison account meetings you've been claiming were actually personal encounters with Ms. Chin, funded through fraudulent expense reports that total over $23,000 in the past 6 months alone. The board erupted into urgent whispered conversations while Kevin stood frozen at the front of the room, his career imploding in real time. But Emma had saved the most damning evidence for last, knowing that financial crimes would trigger immediate legal action while the personal betrayal would ensure Kevin faced maximum social consequences. Most concerning is the evidence that Mr. Morrison has been systematically moving family assets into hidden cryptocurrency accounts while his wife recovers from a stroke, with Ms. Chen's assistance in creating false documentation to justify these transfers. The total amount appears to exceed $300,000, which constitutes both marital fraud and potential tax evasion. The room exploded into chaos as the board members realized they were dealing not just with employee misconduct, but with federal crimes that could expose the company to massive liability. The CEO immediately called for Kevin's suspension pending investigation, while the legal department began damage control procedures to protect the firm from association with his criminal activities. Kevin tried to claim that Sophia had manipulated him, that he was innocent of the financial crimes, that the cryptocurrency transfers were legitimate investments he'd discussed with Linda. But Emma had anticipated every possible defense, providing bank records that showed Kevin as the primary account holder and recorded conversations where he explicitly discussed hiding assets from his wife. Within hours, Kevin was escorted from the building by security while FBI agents arrived to seize his computer and financial records. Sophia, who'd been called in for emergency questioning, broke down completely when confronted with the evidence of her participation in both the professional fraud and the marital asset theft. Her claims of being manipulated fell apart when investigators showed her messages where she'd actively suggested strategies for hiding money and mocking Linda's medical condition. The company's investigation moved with stunning speed once they realized the scope of Kevin's crimes and the potential liability they faced for employing someone who'd been embezzling client funds to finance his personal affairs. Sophia was terminated immediately for violating professional conduct policies, participating in fraud, and using company resources for personal activities, while Kevin faced both criminal charges and civil lawsuits from defrauded clients. Emma's methodical approach had ensured that justice was swift, comprehensive, and devastating to both conspirators while protecting Linda from further financial harm and providing the company with clear documentation to distance themselves from Kevin's criminal enterprise. The aftermath of Emma's corporate revelation created a domino effect that destroyed every aspect of Kevin and Sophia's carefully constructed deception. Within 48 hours of the board meeting, Linda found herself surrounded by a team of professionals dedicated to unraveling her husband's financial crimes and ensuring she recovered every stolen dollar. Emma had coordinated with Linda's neurologist and physical therapist to ensure the revelations were delivered in a way that wouldn't compromise her ongoing recovery, but Linda's reaction surprised everyone with its clarity and determination. "I knew something was wrong," Linda told Emma during their first face-to-face meeting. "Kevin kept pushing me to sign documents without reading them, claiming I needed to focus on my health instead of boring financial stuff. But my cognitive function is fine. I just have some speech and mobility challenges. He was treating me like I was mentally incompetent when I'm perfectly capable of understanding what he was trying to steal." Armed with Emma's evidence and her own growing suspicions, Linda filed for divorce while simultaneously reporting Kevin to the FBI for embezzlement, tax evasion, and wire fraud. Her attorney, who specialized in cases involving financial abuse of vulnerable adults, was astounded by the scope of Kevin's crimes and the detailed documentation Emma had provided. The investigation revealed that Kevin's cryptocurrency schemes were even more extensive than the messages had indicated, with over $300,000 in marital assets converted to digital currency and hidden across multiple wallets managed by his brother in another state. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit treated the case as a priority because it involved both corporate embezzlement and exploitation of a stroke survivor, making Kevin eligible for enhanced penalties under federal guidelines for crimes against vulnerable adults. Linda's medical team provided crucial documentation showing how Kevin's emotional abuse and financial manipulation had complicated her stroke recovery, creating additional stress that had measurably impacted her physical therapy progress and cognitive rehabilitation. Dr. Martinez, her neurologist, submitted a detailed report explaining how financial stress and marital instability could trigger setbacks in stroke recovery, giving Linda's legal team powerful evidence of the additional harm Kevin had caused beyond simple theft. Meanwhile, Sophia found herself facing consequences she'd never anticipated when she embraced Kevin's philosophy that cheating was just mature adult behavior. Her desperate attempts to distance herself from Kevin's crimes fell apart when investigators showed her the extensive paper trail of her participation in creating false invoices, fake expense reports, and fraudulent documentation for the cryptocurrency transfers. The messages where she'd mocked Linda's medical condition and actively encouraged Kevin's asset-hiding strategies made it impossible for her to claim ignorance or manipulation. "I was just doing what Kevin asked," she told investigators, but her own words contradicted any claims of innocence. "I thought we were planning a future together, not committing crimes." The prosecution wasn't interested in her relationship motivations. They were focused on her active participation in federal financial crimes and her use of professional skills to facilitate fraud. Sophia's graphic design expertise had been crucial to Kevin's schemes, creating official-looking documents that had fooled banks, accountants, and even Linda's own financial advisors. Her artistic talents, which she'd always seen as her path to success, had become evidence of sophisticated fraud that carried potential prison time. Kevin's arrest made headlines in Denver's business community because the embezzlement amount exceeded $300,000 and involved a respected marketing firm with high-profile clients. The local news coverage focused on how a stroke survivor had nearly been financially destroyed by her own husband while she focused on recovery, creating public outrage that ensured prosecutors would seek maximum penalties. The story resonated with families dealing with medical crises, highlighting how vulnerable people could be exploited by those closest to them during their most difficult moments. Kevin's attempts to negotiate plea deals were complicated by the overwhelming evidence of premeditation and the enhanced penalties for targeting a vulnerable adult. His recorded conversations showed months of planning, detailed strategies for hiding assets, and explicit discussions about taking advantage of Linda's medical condition to avoid detection. The prosecution had no interest in reducing charges for someone who'd systematically planned to destroy his wife's financial security while she recovered from a life-threatening medical event. Sophia watched her life collapse as Emma ensured the evidence of her professional misconduct circulated through Denver's tight-knit marketing community, effectively ending her career prospects in the city where she'd planned to build her future. Former colleagues who'd respected her creativity now saw her as someone who'd used her talents to facilitate fraud and mock a stroke survivor, making her unemployable in an industry that relied heavily on trust and professional relationships. The expensive lifestyle she'd maintained through Kevin's stolen money disappeared overnight, leaving her facing potential criminal charges while struggling to afford basic living expenses in a city where her reputation was permanently destroyed. 3 weeks after Kevin's arrest, I was working late in my apartment when someone started pounding on my door with desperate urgency. Through the peephole, I saw Sophia looking like she hadn't slept in days, hollow eyes, unwashed hair, wearing clothes that looked like she'd been living in them. When I opened the door, she practically collapsed against the frame, clutching a manila envelope like it contained her last hope for salvation. "Marcus, thank God you're here," she said, pushing past me without invitation. "I need your help. Everything's falling apart and you're the only person who might understand what Kevin really is." I watched her pace around the living room where we'd once shared quiet evenings, noting how different she looked from the confident woman who'd lectured me about mature relationships just a month earlier. Her designer clothes had been replaced with discount store basics, her expensive manicure was chipped and grown out, and she moved with the frantic energy of someone running out of options. "What do you want, Sophia?" "I brought you something that proves I was just as much Kevin's victim as anyone else," she said, dumping the contents of the envelope onto my coffee table. The papers scattered across the surface showed printouts of photos, recordings, and documents that made my stomach turn. Kevin was recording us, Marcus. Every intimate moment, every private conversation, everything we did together. He told me last week that if I tried to cooperate with the FBI, he'd release all of this online and claim I seduced him to steal company secrets. The evidence was sickening. Kevin had apparently been documenting their affair from the beginning, not as romantic mementos but as insurance against exactly this situation. There were photos taken without Sophia's knowledge, recordings of private conversations where she'd expressed doubts about their plan, and even videos that Kevin had clearly shot for blackmail purposes rather than mutual enjoyment. "He's been playing both of us, Marcus," Sophia continued, her voice breaking. "I thought I was his partner, but I was just another person he was manipulating. He made me feel sophisticated and worldly, like I was finally with someone who understood how successful people really operate. But he was just using me to do his work and take the fall if anything went wrong." Looking at the evidence, I realized Sophia had been both perpetrator and victim in Kevin's schemes. She'd willingly participated in mocking Linda and planning the financial fraud, but Kevin had been systematically documenting everything to ensure she'd face the consequences while he maintained plausible deniability. "I never meant for Linda to get hurt," Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. Kevin made it sound like she was already checked out, like the stroke had changed her into someone different. He said she'd be happier with a simple life, that the money would just confuse her during recovery. The manipulation was sophisticated and cruel, but it didn't excuse Sophia's active participation in the cruelty I'd seen in those messages. "You called her damaged goods, Sophia? You helped plan to steal her medical recovery fund. You mocked her speech therapy sessions." I know, she sobbed. "I became someone horrible because Kevin made it seem normal, like that's how successful people really think about weakness. But seeing myself through the FBI's questions, hearing my own words read back to me, I don't recognize the person I became." Her transformation was obvious and devastating, but genuine remorse couldn't undo the damage she'd helped inflict on an innocent family. "I'm probably going to prison, Marcus. My lawyer says I could face 3 to 5 years as an accessory to Kevin's crimes, plus civil liability for the money we stole. My parents won't even talk to me after they saw the news coverage about what we did to a stroke survivor." The consequences were appropriate, but I found myself feeling unexpected sympathy for someone who'd been manipulated by a predator even while she was helping him prey on others. "What do you want from me, Sophia?" "I want you to know that what I said about cheating being normal, that wasn't really me talking. That was Kevin's philosophy, his way of making me feel sophisticated for betraying everything I actually believed in. You were right to expect loyalty, Marcus. You were right about everything." Her apology felt genuine, but it came too late to matter for anything except her own conscience. "I've been thinking about moving back to Ohio if I don't go to prison," she continued. "Start over somewhere nobody knows what I've done. Maybe work for my uncle's insurance agency in some tiny town where they still believe in the values I threw away." The woman who'd once dreamed of conquering Denver's marketing scene was now planning to hide in small-town obscurity, and there was something fitting about that outcome. "I hope you find whatever you're looking for," I told her, meaning it sincerely. "But I can't help you with this. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences." She nodded, gathering up the blackmail materials with shaking hands. "I know. I just needed you to understand that not everyone who cheats is a sociopath like Kevin. Some of us are just weak people who got manipulated by someone stronger and more ruthless." As she prepared to leave, Sophia paused at the door and looked back at our old apartment one last time. "You deserved so much better than what I gave you, Marcus. I hope you find someone who appreciates what you offered me." After she left, I sat there thinking about manipulation, accountability, and the difference between explanation and excuse. Sophia had been Kevin's victim in many ways, but she'd also made conscious choices to hurt innocent people, and understanding her motivations didn't diminish the real damage she'd caused to Linda's family and my own trust. 6 months later, I was reading the Denver Post over coffee when I saw the headline that brought the entire saga to its final conclusion: local marketing executive sentenced to 12 years for embezzlement and elder fraud. Kevin had received the maximum sentence under federal guidelines, with the judge specifically noting that his exploitation of a stroke survivor and systematic planning made him deserving of enhanced penalties. The article detailed how prosecutors had recovered over $300,000 in hidden cryptocurrency assets, which would be returned to Linda along with additional damages for the emotional distress and medical complications Kevin's abuse had caused. Sophia had received 3 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to conspiracy and fraud charges, with her cooperation in exposing Kevin's larger criminal network earning her a reduced sentence. The judge had noted that while Sophia had been manipulated, her active participation in targeting a vulnerable adult made incarceration necessary to reflect the seriousness of her crimes. She was currently serving her time at a minimum security facility in Colorado, and according to the article, planned to relocate to Ohio upon release to work in her family's insurance business. Linda's recovery had exceeded all medical expectations, with her legal team attributing her progress partly to the relief of having Kevin's financial abuse exposed and stopped. She'd kept the family home, received substantial restitution from both the criminal case and civil lawsuits, and had enough resources secured to focus entirely on her rehabilitation and her children's college funds. The article mentioned that she'd become an advocate for other stroke survivors, speaking about the importance of financial protection during medical crises and the warning signs of elder financial abuse. Emma had been promoted to Kevin's former position as department head, where she'd implemented new oversight procedures to prevent future employee fraud and ensure credit was properly attributed for all creative work. The company had used the scandal as an opportunity to strengthen their ethical guidelines and create better protection for employees reporting misconduct, with Emma leading the initiative to build a more transparent and accountable workplace culture. Her leadership during the crisis had earned her recognition throughout Denver's business community as someone who prioritized integrity over convenience. But the most personally meaningful development was my growing relationship with Emma herself, which had started when she contacted me through that anonymous email account to thank me for providing the evidence that protected her sister. Our first coffee meeting had been purely about ensuring Linda received proper support, but we discovered a shared commitment to doing the right thing even when it was difficult, and that foundation had grown into something deeper over the months of legal proceedings and family recovery. Emma appreciated that I'd chosen to protect Linda rather than simply confronting Sophia or Kevin directly, understanding that my approach showed genuine concern for innocent people rather than just personal revenge. "You could have just exposed the affair and walked away," she told me during one of our early conversations. "Instead, you made sure the evidence reached someone who could handle it responsibly and protect the people who were actually being hurt." Our relationship developed slowly and naturally, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than the intense chemistry that had initially drawn me to Sophia. Emma was brilliant, principled, and genuinely interested in my work and opinions rather than just seeking financial security or professional advancement through association. When she laughed at my design jokes or asked thoughtful questions about my client projects, I realized what it felt like to be valued for who I actually was rather than what I could provide. The contrast with Sophia was striking. Where Sophia had seen my reliability as boring, Emma saw it as trustworthy. Where Sophia had viewed my ethical standards as naive, Emma respected them as principled. Where Sophia had treated my emotional investment as weakness, Emma valued it as authentic love. We'd recently started discussing moving in together, and the conversations felt completely different from the practical arrangements I'd made with Sophia, built on genuine partnership rather than convenience and financial benefit. Kevin's downfall had made local news because the amount of embezzlement was substantial and the victim was particularly sympathetic, but the broader story resonated with people dealing with their own relationship betrayals and workplace misconduct. I'd received several messages through mutual friends from people who'd experienced similar situations, thanking me for showing that sometimes the right response to betrayal isn't revenge but ensuring justice reaches the people who can handle it properly. Sophia's prediction that everyone cheats eventually had been proven dramatically wrong by the consequences her philosophy had brought to her own life and Kevin's criminal enterprise. Her belief that mature adults accept infidelity as normal had led her to participate in destroying an innocent family and nearly going to prison for someone who viewed her as expendable. Meanwhile, Emma and I were building something based on the supposedly naive values of loyalty, honesty, and mutual respect that had sustained Linda through her recovery and would continue guiding our own future together. Looking back, I realized that Sophia had been partially right about one thing. Not everyone was capable of the kind of relationship I wanted. But she'd been completely wrong about which people those were.